We're so excited to have you join us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us for this very special webinar. The topic is quite popular these days. This is a continuation from part one, where we had so many people that watched it and felt like it was such an important topic that they wanted to hear more. So this topic is, are we pushing kids too far? Experts discuss early sports specialization and mental health. So excited to have you. My name is Michael Rouse. Thank you for joining us. Today's session, just to give you a little bit of the rules and regulations here, you can see us, but we cannot see you. You're on mute, so please use the Q&A box to ask any questions. Share your questions as they arise. We will do our best to address all questions tonight as time allows. And this presentation is being recorded and will be emailed to everyone who RSVP'd tonight after tonight's event. We have some incredible expert panelists tonight. Danielle Schetter, who's a registered nurse, Dr. Atanda, who was on our last webinar, who is extremely popular with all of our families, Mr. Dickie Noles, a Major League Baseball player from the Philadelphia Phillies. And again, my name is Michael Rouse, Executive Director and co-founder of ESF. I want to just share with you a little bit of backgrounds of each and every one of our expert panelists. Danielle is a long-term dedicated nurse at Nemours Health, has a deep passion for the mental aspects of sport. She integrates her expertise as a past athlete as well as a youth sports coach into her nursing practice. She's a mom of three. Danielle understands the challenges of balancing family and professional life while fostering a positive mindset in sports. Currently, she's pursuing her master's degree in sports performance and psychology to further enhance her knowledge and skills in this vital area. Through her multifaceted roles, Danielle inspires others to prioritize mental health to help achieve whole athlete wellness. We also have Dr. Atanda, who you met last time. He is a pediatric orthopedic surgeon at Nemours Hospital in Delaware, where he serves as the chief of the Center of Sports Medicine and chief of clinical experience, and is also an assistant professor of orthopedic surgery at the Kimmel Medical College at Thomas Jefferson University. He's a graduate of University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, and he completed his residency at University of Chicago Medical Center. Dr. Atanda also completed his fellowship in pediatric orthopedic surgery at Nemours Children's Hospital in Delaware, and is in the sports medicine surgery at the Rothman Institute at Thomas Jefferson University. And our friend Dickie Noles. Dickie was drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies in the 4th round of the 1975 amateur draft. He went on to play professional baseball for 16 years, 11 years in the major leagues during his career. And he played for the Phillies from 79 to 81, and then came back in 1990, and then played for the Chicago Cubs from 82 to 84. And then in 87 was back there, and then played for the Rangers from 84 through 85 season, the Indians in 86, the Tigers in 87, and the Orioles in 88. He is still very active and a key component of the Philadelphia Phillies organization. He's been nationally recognized as a substance prevention and motivational speaker with the Philadelphia Phillies and the major league and minor league systems, helping to educate minor league players on the dangers of alcohol and other drugs. He's a great friend of ESF's. He's been a part of our Phillies fantasy camp for over 25 years. And I'm so excited to have you a part of this discussion tonight, Dickie. So thanks everybody for joining us. So let's get started with tonight. Danielle, take it away.
All right. So I know we already talked about my background. So we'll get started with the problem. So as you guys can all see, and probably attest to with your jam-packed weekends and Ubering to practices, the intensity of youth sports is becoming insane. And then mix that with our mental health epidemic that is very evident. We're just seeing a decline in our athletes' performance and overall well-being. So some common issues in need of support that we're going to discuss a few of them tonight. External pressures being one. This is where we come into play, and we're going to talk about why later. Performance anxiety, low confidence. We're going to discuss how can we help our children to become more confident, which will in turn help their performance and overall well-being. Burnout. major topic here. So we're going to dive more into sports specialization and why our kids are burning out. Concussions, we'll touch on a little bit briefly. This is our invisible injury that can lead to some mental health issues. There's also some gender approach differences between your sons and daughters that we need to touch on, and some just general injuries. So we can continue on, and we'll start talking about our first one here, external pressures. Okay, do we see this statistic? 70% of kids drop out of youth sports by age 13. Wow. So these pressures can be from peers, coaches, and unfortunately, us as parents. So I'm going to read these out loud just because I think they're just something we really need to hear. Studies have shown 1/3 of players reported being encouraged to continue playing by a parent or a coach despite admitting an injury. This is not okay. Secondly, parental pressure and behavior strongly modify the child's sport experience and have been found to potentially decrease athletes' enjoyment of the sports by inducing perfectionistic expectations and increasing anxiety. Sometimes as parents, we have to reflect on our own experiences, and this is being on the sidelines, and most importantly, what I think, the car ride home. And we'll talk about more of that about that later. All right, we're going to move on to performance anxiety, lack of confidence. So, several factors can cause this: overtraining, lack of patience on a results timeline. A lot of kids are like, oh, the doc said, 2 weeks, or, and they think, oh, maybe a week and a half, I'll be fine. So sometimes they get a little frustrated there. Sometimes coaches influence. And for the sake of today, we'll talk more about parent pressure specifically. We have to remember that our job is to be their parent. There's this old pro athlete, I shouldn't say old, past athlete and coach, John O'Sullivan. He did a TED Talk on the impact of saying 5 very powerful words. They are, I love watching you play. So highly recommend that at some point you can Google John O'Sullivan's TED Talk, because highly recommend. There is power, like I said, on not on just the sidelines, but when you're in that car ride home with your kids, saying those words can make such a difference. And we'll talk about later more in detail about why. For those of us that are parents and coaches, I know how hard that can be. I have been coaching my kids since they could walk. And I know I didn't get to say this earlier. My kids are ages 16, 13, and 2.5. So I am in all realms of this athletic world. But it is very hard. And what I suggest as far as performance anxiety goes, sometimes before or after the game, if you are a parent and a coach, sometimes you just have to listen to your child and say, hey, do you want me to answer that as your coach, or do you want me to be your parent right now? So sometimes they are looking for actual critique. And sometimes they just want you to listen. So there is power in just kind of sitting back and asking them, what hat am I putting on right now? Most of the time, they just want you to listen. Some techniques, let me touch on them real quick. Visualization. Best example I can give is, teaching your kids, if they're trying to picture a foul shot, they can do this right before the foul shot, or they can do this in bed, and you teach them to close their eyes and they're going to envision that ball going into that net. And there's research behind this. Whatever sport that they're playing, you're going to teach them the practice of taking a deep breath, visualizing what they want to do, and making it come true. Goal setting is super important to help your kids to set goals, big and small. Mindfulness, just teaching them to give themselves some grace and relax, and modeling positive mindset. There is power in optimism, and it starts with us as parents. All right, moving along, we are going next to just some quotes from some pros, and we're lucky enough to have one here with us tonight that maybe can add to this list. But more and more professionals are speaking out on the importance of mental training. As you can see, the stat, mental training interventions led to a 20% improvement in performance outcomes. So I'm sure you recognize all these names. And maybe Mr. Noles can touch on a little bit about this too, about just having a positive mindset. positive mental training, and just giving yourself some grace to be able to perform.
Well, yeah, I'm reading some of this stuff right now, and it's all very good stuff. And I look back, it says 20% improvement in mental performance just by mental training. We didn't have mental training when I was a player, but we talked about it. And of course, mental performance just came in. Now it's called mental performance. And one of the things that I see here when I look over to Aaron Judge, he says the mental game is what separates the good players from the great players. We've heard that a lot, and it really does. You said something, Danielle, that's very important. You have to see yourself at where you want to be. I'm a big goal setting person, but I wasn't a goal setting person when I was in the minor leagues and coming up in the major leagues. It was after my career, which I called a failure because of the potential that I had, and I didn't reach my potential. But to realize for me, confidence comes from being comfortable. I've heard a lot about confidence throughout my career. People will say, well, if you're successful, you're going to be confident. They also say the game of baseball is a game of failure. If you succeed 3 out of 10 times, you're a Hall of Famer. I say the game of baseball is a game of success. If you're thinking the right way, as this is proof in the process right here, as you got it on a slide. If you're thinking positive, and if you're thinking about, like you said, visualize making the basket, it's proven that you'll get better. So when you visualize your performance, I think you have to be honest and to know yourself. As Charlie Manuel used to say, know thyself. But you have to know where you are in your athletic performance. You have to know. I always tell people, you train for perfection. You play for fun. Because once the game starts, no matter what you talk about, the mental part of the game, the visualization, or any of that, as say a hitter, he's just focusing on the ball. He's not focusing on anything else, but he's got to see the ball to hit it. A pitcher has to focus on the target. You throw one pitch at a time. The great pitcher Greg Maddox said he never thought past one pitch at a time. But in the back of his mind from practicing, he knew how he was going to pitch that hitter. He knew the sequences of pitches he was going to have to throw that hitter according to whatever the first pitch was. If it's first pitch fastball and he's pitching, say he's facing Jose Canseco, he's going to throw him one fastball and all sliders. But you know that, but it's being in the moment. It's being where your feet are. It's being in that moment, throwing one pitch at a time. I think that's where mental performance really starts to make a lot of sense to us as players nowadays compared to the players of the old. We thought the same way. We just didn't know how to put a title on it, with the breathing. And I remember Tom Seaver watching him pitch on one day on TV, and I noticed he was breathing different than I did. He was breathing at the right time. So I practiced that. Nobody told me, I just seen him. And that's kind of the way we learned back in the old days, was watching other successful performers. One of the greatest successful performers of our time has been Michael Jordan. And I love teaching what Michael said. One of the things he said that stayed and been profound and stayed with me that I've been able to share is, like you said earlier, being in the moment. If you focus on the moment and you've practiced and you've put in the time, you're going to be confident at some point. You're going to gain that confidence because you're going to be comfortable because you've put in that work. And so wherever you are at that moment, NBA players told me it ain't the pressure of guarding Michael Jordan when the game's on the line. It's the pressure of him guarding you. So the little things matter. So I like to tell people, if you prepare properly with the little things, you will have that confidence because you're going to feel comfortable in yourself.
It's been pretty incredible reading about Michael Jordan and all these elite athletes of their youth years growing up, and how multiple sports were an important key ingredient in how they, more or less attempted to try out for these high school, college, and professional teams. And I feel like the Malcolm Gladwell 2008 book Outliers, that talked about how you have to master something, and 10,000 hours is the key ingredient. I kind of feel like he fell short with that book because that doesn't work with youth and sports. Um, and I feel that it's so important for today's generational parent to understand that. I mean, I grew up playing multiple sports. I was lucky enough to play in college and played on the pro tour. My sport was tennis, but I didn't get serious about tennis until I was 15. where I was nationally ranked, and I was playing guys in nationals that would demolish me. I mean, talk about, I was lucky if I got 3 games in a match as a 13, 14, 15-year-old. These guys from California, Texas, and Florida in particular were so much better than I was. And it wasn't really until I was 17, 18, 19 into college where I started beating them. I started to concentrate on the sport when I was more like 16 or 17. I got very serious about it, but I started beating those same guys that I was losing to because they were going to academies in Florida and California and Texas. They were playing, they were doing 10,000 hours. That's all they did. And by the time I was 17, 18, I was beating them. And I felt like there's something wrong here. I am not worthy to beat them. Why am I beating them? And I realized that they absolutely hated the sport. They were having injuries, that they were on their second or third operation, and then they started hating their parents or their coaches. And so, doctor, I would love for you to talk about this and what you're seeing in the surgeries that you're doing, because I feel like what I saw in the 80s with tennis is now happening in every sport.
Yeah. I mean, it's an epidemic. I mean, that's really the long and the short of it with these sorts of injuries. And by and large, they're mostly preventable. The idea and the notion that, okay, my kid needs to keep playing, to be noticed, to be on special teams, travel teams, elite level teams, what have you, is great. And I do think you should aspire for that greatness, but it has to be done kind of in alignment with what's best for your body, which is going to be giving it time off, having a few months a year off, giving 3, 4 months a year where you're just not using those same particular muscles and maybe you play a different sport. Like, you have to manage your overall physical health and well-being as well as, the trajectory of whatever career you would aspire to have. So it's a balancing act. And, some families are very good at minimizing kind of how much the kids are doing, at least while they're really young. But sometimes there's challenges, and unfortunately that's what results in doctor's visits and results in surgery, and that's my entire career. But hopefully, today we can kind of dispel some of those myths and point the families back in the right direction.
Dickie, when with your, youth development, at what point did you focus on baseball is it? That's all I'm doing.
I didn't focus on baseball as it, and that was all I was doing until people told me to do that. My athletic director in high school said, don't even come on the football field. Stay out the football field. You're going to be a professional baseball player. You got to give this everything you got. Nobody's ever become a professional from this school. And yet there was one, Bobby Thompson. But I remember them kind of setting that standard for me. It was like, okay, you're going to focus on baseball. But I still played other sports, sandlot ball. One of the things that I see, Michael, and I know where you're going with this, is a lot of kids that have been, travel baseball's taken all the elite kids, right? And then to play travel baseball all winter long, you have to work out with that travel team. You have to go to hitting lessons, you have to go to pitching lessons, and you have to pay the money. It's a money-making industry.
Right.
I think that when you look at the work we've done with kids, I think kids need to, I don't know where they're going to play sandlot ball, Doc, but at sandlot baseball is there's less stress that you can put on a player to learn how to play the game, the better. If they're performing all the time at a high level, we know that we hear it all the time in Major League Baseball now. Well, he pitched, 7 2/3 innings and threw 100 pitches, but he threw 35 stressful pitches. That's all bull to me. Every pitch is a stressful pitch. I mean, you're pitching the same way to get the first hitter out as you are to get the bait out of the bases loaded jam in the 8th inning. I think,
Right.
like I talk about preparing yourself for that, but that's professional ball. The stress for young kids, and we're going to get more into that, so I don't want to get out of line here, is about the parents are playing through their kids. The parents want their kids to
Right.
go to a college. The players want their kids to go to become a pro. And I wonder where sandlot baseball, sandlot sports have went. Well, I found out. I have 2 boys. I coach from 9-year-old to 17-year-olds. Coaching was the greatest thing that ever happened in my life. Much funner than playing Major League Baseball. I hate to tell you that, but it was for me. And I realized that when we wanted to go out and play sandlot baseball, we go to the high school and they'd kick you off the field because of liability. You go to
Right.
other little league fields, we wanted to hit on them. They'd go, did you play here? No, get off this field, go somewhere else. So to get the kids out, to play sandlot baseball is not as easy as it used to be. And I used to practice with my team every day. And at the end of the night, I'd say, okay, you're going to play sandlot baseball. See you later. And I would go out there and start pitching the first inning. And then I would leave the field and let them develop their own coaching ability to say, okay, I'm going to pick this kid, you pick that kid, now we're going to play. So I think sometimes it's all stress baseball that we're worried about, or all stress football, or all stress whatever sport it is.
I think you're right, Dickie. I think that the fun component of practice has been taken away. And that is really where it leads to burnout, which I know Danielle's going to introduce us to right now.
May I say something first, Danielle? I wanted to
Absolutely.
throw this in. This is from left field, but it's bothered me and it keeps bothering me. When I coached, and I coached 17-year-old kids, they never cursed. I wouldn't allow it. I go to games now, my grandson plays, 13, 12-year-old kids are using language that I would have been in a whole lot of trouble if I used that language. We've almost accepted kids at a level that they should be just kids at 11 to 13 or 13 to 15, whatever age. We've almost expected them to play like adults and act like adults.
Great point. Great point.
That was a great point, actually. You are absolutely correct. Having a 16-year-old, that is part of my drive for all of this education and wanting to let everyone know is he is the same way. You're right. He's trying to play like an adult. He's acting like an adult because of the pressures that he's putting on himself, but also the pressure that I guess inadvertently we as a society and parents and community are also putting on them. So that was a great point. We can head to talk about some burnout. This is something that I feel very passionate about. Saying, in addition to my own kids experiencing, warning signs of burnout, I myself, I was a D2 scholarship athlete that burnout and quit. And I'm constantly telling my kids, I am becoming the resource that I wish I had 20 plus years ago, because it's all you did. It was the overtraining and the keeping up with the Joneses. You need a one-on-one trainer, you need a group trainer, you got to do this, you got to do that. And the intensity is so crazy that I myself, it crippled me and I winded up burning out. So parents, I want to give you some warning signs of what burnout looks like so you can educate yourself to try to help your children from avoiding this. So some of the signs look like emotional and physical exhaustion, reduction in interest, and decreased sense of accomplishment. So what does this mean? This can look like them being like, oh, I don't want to go to practice, or I just want to skip my game. I want to go to the party. Or maybe they're having some sleep issues. Maybe they're slower on the field. It can look differently for everyone. And there are some gender differences in what this looks like. You can see a few on the side. Also, too, they say that female burnout rate is a little higher, but that could be slightly skewed because females tend to just express themselves more. So that rate may just be higher because the girls are actually admitting to it. So some causes of this, and we'll get more into detail about them, but early sport specialization, we talked about this. We'll talk about this more in detail in a next slide. Parent pressures, excessive trainings. So we are part of the problem, parents. So we need to make sure we're looking out for these signs. And, if you're seeing your kid not wanting, to go, maybe you need to make sure, they have a play date set up or something fun to look forward to, because you need to make sure that they can turn off that athletic brain and remember that they are a kid, to try to remember why the reason they started playing that sport in the first place anyway, which is for fun and the social involvement. Some techniques to help avoid the non-productive time, like I was just talking about. This is make sure your kids remember their hobbies. Make sure, maybe they're a football player. Let them go play putt-putt. Let them play a different sport for fun. Or maybe they want to do arts and crafts. Maybe they need to sing karaoke, something. They need to embrace their hobbies, because when you can get out of that stressful zone, it's just like us in work. If you're all grind, you start to resent what you're doing. The same thing applies for kids in sports. Also, teach gratitude and self-reflection. So studies show that having a positive self-reflection, I think it's Mel Robbins says that every day you should wake up and give a high five in the mirror. You are awesome. You got this. Teaching your kid to be grateful and thankful and having, a positive self mindset can help them to avoid the burnout as well. And we're going to continue to talk about sports specialization and pressure as well. Okay, pressure and performance. So I did a tri-state field survey for about 20 plus families on the mental aspect of sports. And these were just some highlights specifically from the parents on how they reply to pressure and performance and their children. I'll give you a few minutes to read some. The one that sticks out the most to me is that one in the center. Parents put entirely too much pressure on their children. And even if you personally don't, other parents' actions impact your child. The first time I read this, I thought of, oh my gosh, everyone has that sideline parent, right? You're like, they're screaming at their child to do something different, or they're screaming at the ref and they're hearing it, or they're screaming at your own kid to do something better because, they played once 30 years ago and they deemed themselves the expert. So all these things, we think our kids aren't listening, they're listening, and it's putting pressure on them. Schools do not make it easy for athletes participating in a sport outside of school. Also hard. And we'll talk more about this later too. And like Mr. Noles was saying, that sandlot baseball and things like that, it is so important to make sure that we're being more well-rounded and not just staying in the grind of the heavy club sports. And we're going to start talking more now about that early sports specialization. Okay. Early sports specialization, and I know that Dr. Atanda talked on this in the first webinar as well, and he will speak to this as well a little bit more, but this refers to year-round training and playing of one sport, typically before the age of 12. So, fact or myth, does early focus lead to greater success? Ding, ding, ding. The answer is no. Some parents are thinking, okay, we'll have them play year-round. We're going to train year-round. We're going to focus. That's not leading to greater success. And like Michael said, how he was successful, it's because what's happening when these kids are focusing so hard, the intensity is just causing them to wind up burning out and not liking their sport, quitting, or getting injured. So just some facts. It can cause increased training hours, because if you're specializing in one sport, you have all the time in the world, you're just focusing on that sport. And what is that doing? You're using the same muscles, and it's causing increase in injury. We say to delay it until late adolescence, if at all. Playing different sports, obviously you're using different parts of your brain, different muscles. You have different friend groups. All these things can equate to trying to avoid that burnout or that injury rate. The delay helps in minimizing injury, physical stress, and burnout. So rec versus club, this is all the rage right now. So we need to keep those rec leagues alive, because what's happening is all these kids are putting all their eggs into one basket and playing club because they're thinking early focus, more intense, more competition. It's going to make me better. It's not. It's counterproductive. And I'm here to tell you to keep your kids into rec sports. The club level sports, yes, they're important. Your kid needs to grow as an athlete and become slightly more intense and learn all the new things, 100%. In addition to that, though, I'm suggesting that they stay in rec for that same sport and also other sports, because what that's going to do, that's going to keep them together with their friends. It's going to put the fun back in sport. It's going to keep it a little bit more basic, yes. And they may not win all the games because not all the kids are equally as qualified or trained, but at the end of the day, they are going to have fun. And that is the most important part of youth sports. Dr. Atanda, if you want to touch on this a little bit more as well to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think the notion that I always talk about is the notion of free play. If you let 10, 20 kids go in the backyard, all they need is grass, and forget it, they don't even need grass. We used to play in the street. You know what I mean? They will sort themselves out. They will fight. They'll argue. They'll talk trash. Somebody will get hurt and they'll help them. Somebody will get kicked in the stomach. Then they fight some more, and then they all go home. And they come home. Hey, how was football? Oh, it was fine. Meanwhile, they lived like 3 lifetimes. So it's that free play where we're not involved is what's key. Now, if you want to have, higher level club play, elite play, I get that. But like you were saying, Danielle, if you preserve 2, maybe 3 months a year, where, I mean, you don't have to sit at home and sit on the couch, but you can do something, but just literally do it maybe at just a basic level with some neighborhood kids, just to keep up your skills, keep up your touches, depending on what sports you play. So if we can infuse free play back into the equation somehow, maybe not 100% of the time, but even in 10, 20% of the time, I think that would be ideal. I wanted to touch on the schematic we have here. Is we like to focus on this idea of LTAD, or long-term athletic development. And as you can see here, there's actually varying different kind of primary goals at different phases of their lives. And you can see like training to compete isn't even really till, for boys and girls around 15, 16 years of age. And you talk to a lot of sports parents, they would think that's crazy because you have 4, 5, 6-year-old kids out there training. So the way I view your journey, your personal journey, your emotional journey is like an athletic journey. And you have to, learn the fundamentals, the basics, try, push yourself a little bit, have the bumps and bruises, get a feel of the game, become one with the game. Then, like Mr. Knowles was saying, maybe sometime in 10th, 11th grade, if you want to really put your eggs in one basket and focus on something, you can do that, but still keeping in the back of your mind that, you can do other things. So this is kind of how I explain it to parents, because a lot of times they and their children, they think very short-sighted. They're like, oh, well, my ankle hurts and I came to see you, but you need to clear me so I can play in this tournament tomorrow. They don't understand that it's a marathon, right? You don't take your breaks as you can, because it's a long journey. And I should be able to say a few words about the next topic.
This slide, Doctor, is very powerful, and I believe that
Oh, this is Danielle's.
that last slide was very powerful, and I feel like we're observing youth getting into club sports at even a younger age. I mean, Dickie, we're seeing kids at age 7 playing club year round, and it is really worrisome because of the fact of the burnout issue that Danielle was just talking about. I'd love for you to just talk about what you're seeing with major leaguers today who you're working with, and are they doing this at a younger age, or are you seeing the multi-sport that we're seeing in like the NFL, where over 80% of NFL players who were drafted in the last 3 years have all played multiple sports all the way through high school?
Well, let me start with something real brief. I like football, baseball players to draft them because there's just something about the football, baseball player. You can call it mental toughness. Can you teach mental toughness? Yes, I believe that. But let me say something about when we're talking about professional athletes, they're much smarter than you think they are. We used to love rainouts. When you're in professional sports, you're playing 192 straight days. We'd get a rainout in spring training. It was like, yes, what do we do? We get together, we go to the movies. Somebody might just go, like Danielle said, play putt-putt. We do crazy things when we have off days. We just do something just to be different. There's a little tight little circle of professional athletes. They keep themselves in that little circle of people they can trust. And that's not the press. It's a little bit different today. They can't even move. That's not management. It's like, okay, this is our day. This is our off day. We're not answering to nobody other than ourselves. But here's another issue that I see with youth sports, baseball, football, basketball, every one of them. When they're young players, we're going after those players at 11 years old to try to put them in a certain school, such as Malvern or Bonner or whatever school they want to go to, where they can get a better chance of getting drafted. And so they're scouting kids now at the age of 11, 12. I've heard them come up to a little league kid and say, "You're going to play for our school. We're very interested in you. We can maybe give you a scholarship." So they start thinking that way, and they don't understand that that kid at 11 might not be the same kid at 15 talent-wise. That kid at 12 might be the biggest kid in Little League and hitting all the home runs and doing all this and having all the strikeouts as a pitcher. But when he's 17, he might not be the same kid. So I think that what you guys are all talking about here, and I look at that slide up here and it says train to train, train to compete, train to win. listen, they keep score for a reason. Kids know you're trying to win. Kids know everything about trying to win, but there's a way to win. And I believe wellness is a part of winning, or a way to win. I think that's what we're all talking about tonight. I'm excited to hear more. So
Yeah,
what
and our
I see
last,
in major leaguers, let me answer your questions. It's what I see
yeah,
in major leaguers is they're a lot more well than you think they are. One of the greatest topics to ever come in our sport was mental health, because as we know, men, and I'm maybe getting ahead of ourselves here, but men are macho. Men are told to, if you get hurt, spit on it, and you be a man about it. Go back out there. Your arm hurts. I mean, I don't know how many times I was pitching in a game and I was afraid to tell someone my arm's hurting, because there was someone behind you ready to take your job. So that pressure to perform is there. But I think we've turned the tide on this a little bit, and maybe not enough, but we're heading that way, to say it's okay to fail, and it's okay to be hurt, and it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to ask for help. And so I'm excited that this is going, that I'm excited about what you guys are doing, and that this is going out to hopefully many parents and many young people also.
Danielle, I know there's a difference between females and males when it comes to their growth development, and walk us through that. What is that difference?
Yeah, so there are just some major differences between our boys and our girls of, what their anxiety looks like, what their motivation needs are. And just a couple, for you guys to recognize, to be aware of, because, like you were just saying, spin on it and be okay, move on. Your kids may be acting in a certain way, your daughter different than your son, and you need to be aware. Um, Motivational wise, girls tend to just use that mental toughness, the positive self talk. Like I said, that high five in the mirror, the girls are doing it more than the boys are doing it. Um, Also, the social impact for the girls. So you'll see, a lot of times the girls want to go to the practice or to the game to be with their friends. So if you're noticing a difference in that, they're not wanting to go, something could be going on. um, Males, they are driven by competition, also desire to achieve. So sometimes you need to be on the lookout where they're being so motivated to achieve that they're overdoing it. You need to notice, are they focusing? Are they sleeping differently? These little things can be different from your son to your daughter. How their anxiety presents. Males tend to have more of somatic anxiety, which is physical symptoms. So you could see, they're nauseous. They don't want to eat dinner. They're coming home with their lunch bag, not eaten, something like that. Headaches. Boys tend to present that way more. And girls are more cognitive. So the door's shut, they're crying, they're moody, they're off, things like that. So just some subtle differences between them, but super, super important for us parents to sort of be a little bit more in the know. Even though you may think they're just having a bad day or something's wrong, those little changes in their behaviors could be a sign of some anxiety approaching or something that's going on, burnout, whatever it may be. And if you can nip it in the bud early, it will just help, not only their performance athletically, but also just their overall well-being.
And Danielle,
Um,
when they're practicing, there's obviously at a young age, and they're very competitive. You are, and we are seeing more concussions, injuries that are being reported to us. As a child will enter our camps. My child's had one or two different concussions from their season and things like that, and it's amazing. I'm just seeing this, get younger and younger every year. Can you talk about that?
yeah, absolutely. So from the mental aspect of things, we have to realize that concussions are more than just a headache. They're more than just your kid being out for, the time period that the doctor said. It's why we call it the invisible injury. So a lot of these kids from a mental health standpoint are struggling because, they're out of their sport. And for a lot of kids, sports are life. It's a big part of of their world. And being isolated from not being able to participate is, it's causing them pain. It's causing them to be depressed. It's causing them fear. They're wondering, am I going to regress because all of a sudden I'm out for 2 weeks, or I didn't get cleared, I'm out for another week. They're wondering, is someone going to take my position? They're angry. They're experiencing FOMO, as the kids call it. So, oh my gosh, I'm not only missing out from the practice, but I'm missing out from the games, or I can't even participate with them out back if their concussion's that bad. And also sometimes, they don't have an exact timeline. It's sort of, you're going to keep getting checked. And if it's a reoccurrent concussion, if it's their second or third, or maybe it was just a one really big bad blow, sometimes that timeline isn't exactly what they want, or it's unknown. And that unknown is obviously very fearful to them. So without a defined timeline, they're just having more anxiety. Also, too, a lot of these, elite athletes, or, youth elite athletes that are really becoming perfectionists and things like that, that also tends to correlate with them academically. So not only are they being, type A, worried about what's happening to them as an athlete, it also can affect them academically as well, because a lot of times, you can't look at a screen. And as we know, a lot of the schoolwork is done online now. So, they can't look at the screen, or even reading a book could be giving them a headache or things like that. So that stress correlates academically and athletically. So just please be aware, obviously the physical symptoms, that's a whole other realm, and I can let Dr. Atanda touch on that if we want to talk about that. But the mental aspect, it's deeper than just missing out. It's deeper than just a headache. So you need to really be aware that if your kids do experience one, there is an anxiety, depression component to it. And we're going to touch, I don't know, Dr. Atanda, if you wanted to touch on that, on the physical side of things, or if we want to talk confidence.
Yeah, you can go ahead. I know we're kind of running a little low on time. I want you to be able to get your thoughts in.
Yeah, no. I just didn't know if you wanted to touch any more on concussions, or if we want to go to confidence.
Yeah, you can keep moving.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, let's talk about, how do we cope during injury? So great. Thank you for putting this one up. So this was also part of the field survey that I did with kids that experience injuries. This is concussions included. And these were some live answers from parents on what a concussion or injury can do to a kid and how they feel. So this one was heartbreaking. The doctor had to put him on antidepressants. He was overeating and failing at school. So again, this is that athletic and academic issue that can be caused from an injury. She didn't have any resources to deal with the mental fallout of her injury. So again, whether it's a concussion or a broken leg or whatever the injury may be, again, it's not just about the actual injury. What that's causing with these kids, it's awful. It's destroying their social impact. It's hurting their fear of, like I said, is my position going to be taken? Am I going to be in the starting lineup? Am I going to miss out on that party? Am I going to miss out on this? So please be aware that when your child has an injury, there's more to it than just the injury. So the mental side is very, very apparent, and you need to look out for some signs.
Dickie and Dr. Atanda, I know this is a really key component. I mean, if there's any athletes out there, they're always having some type of serious injury. I mean, I know I had 2 serious injuries, and I was depressed as a teenager. I was upset. I was disappointed. And everybody has those types of injuries. And I think it's really important for the 2 of you to speak to our audience, because of the fact that it's almost like, rather than rehab, let's talk about prehab. Before Dr. Atanda, somebody gets on Dr. Atanda's table, what do you both recommend to prevent that from happening?
Yeah, I can go first.
John,
I mean,
you take
at least
that.
at least for me, sorry, Mr. Noles, we, especially for like ACL tears, like large injuries that the kid's going to be out 9 to 12 months, we spend a significant amount of time prior to even, doing any surgery, to manage their expectations as to when they'll be able to put weight on their leg, when they'll be able to go back to school, when they'll be able to drive, when they'll be able to do this and that. Because a lot of times the kids need that kind of timeline slowly put out in front of them so they can kind of see that they're approaching a goal. If they just kind of think, oh my God, I'm out for 9 months, it doesn't seem like a one a day journey. It seems more of like this big catastrophic time period. So I try to manage their expectations. I try to look at things again with that marathon approach. They got to take it one day at a time. And we are fortunate in Nemours to have resources for a lot of our kids from a behavioral health perspective. But a lot of clinics and a lot of places in this area and in the country don't have that. So even if you can't necessarily provide that as a provider, at least somewhat trying to point them in the right direction of somebody that they can work with them if you think or the parents are concerned that the child may be struggling.
I think that was excellent. That's why I said take it. But their support system. With our organization, I was with the Phillies as an EAP for 30 years. One of the things I used to stop and do before I even seen all the other players was go in the rehab building. It's their own building. They're separate than the other clubhouse. The rehab building was over here. The clubhouse was over there. Though they dressed in the clubhouse, they spent all their time in the rehab building. And nowadays, with all the try to throw so hard, try to run so fast, try to hit the ball so far, and with all the weightlifting, but realistically, the new age of teaching baseball with Driveline and some organizations that's come in about throwing the baseball as hard as you can, spin it hard as you can. We've had a lot of Tommy Johns. But you said something that was so important, a day at a time. If you can focus on, okay, today I'm going to do the best I can today. And because every athlete wants that time frame to go by faster than fast. They want to get well right away, and probably asking you all the time, Doc, when am I going to be ready? When am I going to be ready? And but I think that's important to, it's not easy to be hurt and come back from Tommy John. We had, our number one prospect just had Tommy John, and we're waiting on him still to come up to the big leagues. And it's not that easy. It took two years for him to come back, and now he's pitching in AAA. But when you have a person that's injured, like you said, with an ACL or an MCL or labrum tear or Tommy John, whatever it may be, that's a long period of recovery. So I think the mental part of that becomes huge, and I think you hit on that just right.
In the last webinar we had with Dr. Atanda, we had Paul Asiante. He's the winningest coach in living and deceased in NCAA history with 22 national squash titles from Trinity College. And Paul mentioned that when he's interviewing candidates to come to Trinity to play for him, the first thing he'll ask is, what sports did you play growing up? Next question is, up to what age did you start to focus and concentrate just on squash? Then the third is, what has happened? What have you done when you have had an injury to, overcome the challenge of your injury? Those three answers that he hears out of those candidates' mouth determine whether he's going to recruit them or not. And unless he sees that they have played multiple sports all the way through till the better part of that 11th grade year in high school, he'll pass on athletes. And I thought that was extraordinary to hear from, obviously the top 1% of the sport of squash, the person who's won all the national titles, of how he's recruiting. And this next slide I thought was really powerful that we covered last time, Dr. Atanda, and I just think that this, for our audience, is so important to understand. Do you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, just real briefly. So you can see here, these are just some general principles of youth sports specialization that I advise parents. Biggest thing is, as we say, is actually just one team at a time. If you're playing multiple days a week, you don't want to be playing on multiple teams a week, because that's just going to add up the amount of time that you're playing. Specifically for baseball, again, we like to delay specialization till probably for boys, probably around 14, girls about 16, when they're getting into that kind of mid-pubescent and post-pubescent phase. We look at a general guideline of how many hours they can play that sport or should play that sport in a week. So if they're 13 years old, they probably shouldn't play more than 13 hours of that organized sport, having at least 2 to 3 days a week and ample recovery time away from the sport. And this was the big thing here. No more than 8 months per year of the same organized sport. So obviously, if the kids want to play year round and do all kinds of different things, there's nothing wrong with that. But if they are going to play one organized sport mostly, we recommend that they spend about 4 months away from it, doing a different sport or not doing any sport at all, and then definitely finding ways to incorporate free play throughout that time period when they're playing and training.
Danielle, we have a couple parents asking some questions like, where do we begin to do the reset? Because some of them are raising their hands saying, yeah, I'm one of these parents that have been focusing on that sport year round. Where do we begin?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think the reset can begin with confidence. I think one, we need to really, and I know we'll talk about this, we're going to help our kids to build confidence. And once they're more confident in themselves, they will realize by exploring other sports and by taking a breather and exploring a hobby, they may realize there's power in that, and they will feel a difference and maybe not want to be as intense as they're being. If they're not having fun, they should not be doing it. And I think that's where the open discussion needs to start. Talk with your kids. They actually probably feel a lot more than you realize. So ask them the questions, do you want to go? Now, I know a lot of parents say, okay, well, what happens if they're mid-season? Should I teach them to quit? Or, I don't want to teach them to quit and I want to teach them to finish it out. Yes, I highly recommend that you do teach your kids. If you signed up for something, you should complete something. However, there's exceptions. If your child it's actually causing them physical or mental harm, then there's obviously exceptions to every rule. But in general, if your child is not having fun, it's got to go. Or maybe they just need, like Dr. Atanda said, maybe that 4-month gap in it, they'll learn to love it again. There's beauty in space. So we have that in our personal relationships. It also applies to athletics. And just speaking about confidence, we as parents, we're the ones that can help them to create, to be resilient and to be powerful and maybe to make their own choices and advocate for themselves in what they want to do and what they want to don't want to do. General rule of thumb, always praise their effort over the outcome. Maybe they lost the game, but maybe they had a really great catch or really great slide or a foul shot or whatever it is. You want to focus on that. We don't want to focus on the loss. When we teach them to set the goals, guide their goals, what do you want to do? Do you want to get how many home runs, or do you want to weight lift 1 day a week? Do you want to, whatever their goal is, we're going to help them to set those goals. Obviously they need to be age appropriate. And as they reach those goals, we praise them. When we praise them, it helps them to create a sense of confidence and pride. Encouraging new things. This is major. And this goes apart with sports specialization and confidence. So trying new things, you need to do it as a parent as well. Because when you model this growth mindset and show them, the power in vulnerability and being afraid and trying something new, you are showing them, wow, I can be adaptable. I can be resilient. I have courage. They're watching more than you think. So you as a parent can actually model this, whether it's something with work, or maybe you're trying a new food, or maybe you're going to try to have a lacrosse catch with them, whatever it may be. If you practice this growth mindset with them, it'll teach them as well. We talked about this a little bit earlier, positive affirmations, power, and optimism. I'm not saying you have to overly be, all yay, be the cheerleader, but, overall, if you just teach them, it's going to be okay. It's okay to fail. You can do this. That will get engraved into their head. Number one rule, teach them that failure is actually a blessing. So when your kid fails, they have automatically taught themselves a lesson. So mistakes are good. They are learning opportunities. So whatever it is that they're failing in, you need to help them to bring the optimism into that. Okay, you failed. This is amazing. What have you learned doesn't work? What have you learned that you want to set a new goal for to teach yourself? So when you teach them, hey, try a new sport. It's okay to fail. There's power in that and helping them to build confidence.
Yeah, it's such an important part,
I hope
Danielle.
that answered your question.
Yeah, at ESF, we really are always concentrating on the fact that, and there's a lot of competition with our sports camp, but we either win or we learn. There's no losing. We win or we learn. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, overall, I always say whole athlete wellness. So, how do we achieve this? You guys being here tonight as parents is the first step, in making changes. And as parents, we are their first line of defense in helping to maintain their athletic mental health and also their personal mental health. Sometimes it's beyond our control. And that's when I say sometimes you do have to seek professional help, and that's okay. As we saw in the professional side, there's professionals out there that are getting professional help. And that's okay. We need to kind of decrease that stigma and help kids to realize that it takes courage and bravery to admit that you're having anxiety in sports, that something is not working. But from a parent standpoint, we are their first line of defense. So learning, what the burnout warning signs are and being a little bit more in tune with your child's demeanor, we can really help to teach them a little bit more overall wellness to be on the field healthy and off the field. And by maintaining, hey, play all the sports, do all the things, take risks. It's really important to make a healthy athlete. Any questions?
Yeah, we've got some really great questions coming in. First of all, I want to thank you, Danielle, Dickie, and Dr. Atanda. We've got some really interesting questions from some of our parents. One of them is, are today's coaches, Dickie, coaching our youth the wrong way in your eyes?
Well, let me answer that question, but I mentioned Malvern and Bonner in the very beginning. I didn't mention them schools for any reason other than they're great schools. And one of the things that I've found out about both of those schools is they're teaching the whole person. They care about the education. They care about if you play at that school. They care about your performance naturally. But when they're when every kid, I mentioned Bonner and Malvern because that seems to be in Delaware County, every kid's dream to go to those schools. And I think there's a reason why, because they're doing it the right way. Many of those schools are there's a lot of schools doing things the right way. When that parent said they needed a restart, there's one thing that I want to touch on is it's okay for your kids to play. I agree with that whole slide, Doc, but the one part about playing for one team, I think it's okay for some kids to play for multiple teams. I think the parent has to listen to their kids. Coaches, I reckon I was trying to avoid that question, but I have a love-hate relationship with what I see going on coaching youth baseball today. I'm not saying that I was the perfect coach, but I will say this, that I was trained by another coach who had been a coacher for a long time, and his philosophy was, I was a major league player. I'm coaching little league, like, hey man, go out and play and have fun. I'm not doing coaching really. He taught me to be a coach by this little simple comment. He told me that God gave you 12 or 13 or 14 or ever how many players are on your team, special kids, but he's not going to tell you which one's special. So if you coach all the kids, you naturally can't coach them the same, but you need to treat them as though they're all special and find out what a kid can do. Find out their strengths and their weaknesses, and find out and always be positive. What I see today is winning is taking over. If I'm a coach and I'm trying to win because it's going to make me look good, then I shouldn't be on the field. If I'm a coach and I expect my son who's playing for me to do things the way I want him to do differently than I do the other kids, then I shouldn't be on the field. Some coaches play through their kids. I've heard that 100 times. But I remember one event when my kids came home one day, I had twins, you know that, Michael, and one of them was struggling. And we said it having dinner. He goes, "Hey, you're a former major league player. You going to help me or what?" And I said, "Help you do what?" He goes, "Didn't you notice today I went 0 for 4, struck out twice?" And I looked at the other one who had a pretty good game. And I said, "Did you notice that, Nick?" And he looks at me, he goes, "Shut up, Dad. You know I struggled today." But what I'm saying is, for a parent and for a coach, you have to listen to the kids. And parents need to listen to their kids. That young lady or young man, whoever text in, how do I restart? Start listening to your kid. Start making that a priority. They'll tell you where they're at in their performance. Failure will never overtake me if my determination to succeed is strong enough. If you understand what I just said, that means the kid, to me, you don't motivate your kid, you inspire your kid. You don't motivate your team, you inspire your team. That's by doing everything that you can do to make those kids on that field be the best in the best situation that they can be in for their talent. So I don't know if that made any sense or not, but
Yeah, so true. Danielle mentioned, sports are their life, when it comes to kids. It's their life. And I know when I see parents involved in even practice, I'm watching all these parents. My dad had a great saying that he'd be there at my game or at practice in spirit, 'cause they couldn't make it, right? And that sport became my sport. That was my sport. And I loved that sport. The fact that my parents weren't even involved was it became my sport. And I think that we have got to, as parents, really recognize that there's a mature development process of allowing our kids, to be able to eventually say, that's my sport. And they'll guide the process versus being told, don't do this, do that. Uh, Dr. Danielle, I know you have a lot of experience in this. So what's your thoughts on that?
No, I think that's a good point. To be honest with you, I haven't really heard that term, my sport per se. As a sports medicine surgeon, everything about seeing the athletes, I mean, their parents are right there. But yeah, I mean, maybe even having a rule where like no parents are allowed at practice. You drop your kid off, go back and sit in the car, go to the concession stand, do what have you, so they can have their own little thing. Kind of like, when you have kids who do dance, like ballerinas, ballet recitals, like the parents aren't necessarily there, they're performing and practicing. Same with like theater, and then they put on this big show, which is the show. And the sports could be the same thing, like the kids play and that's like the show to everybody, but all the preparation and everything was done kind of internally and behind the scenes. You know what I mean? Obviously, the parents got to pay for everything and take them places, but bringing that culture back so it's their journey, and then the parents are just kind of supporting them through it, as opposed to like, this is our family journey and I'm the one who plays and everybody watches me. I mean, it's just, I like how you said my sport. I'm going to definitely use that from now on. That was a great point.
I like what you just said, Doc, supporting them. And I'm gonna bring up some controversial right now, but coaches, and I hope they're listening. Don't stand at third base when a pitch. I used to hate this all the time. Pitch comes in, a guy swings at a high pitch, especially little league. Don't swing at that. That ball's too high. Make sure that next pitch's not high. Make sure it's a strike. I used to make my coaches don't say a word, not a word. You can wave them on to go to second, to go to third, but do not say negative things. Just they know they know when they swung at a pitch over their head. But I've learned today that the coaches have to deal with the other side of the fence. And I've been in youth baseball for a long time. And now that my grandson's playing, I hear some god awful things. My question is, how do we reach those parents? How do we get those parents to understand what they're saying is worse than the coaches sometimes? And those parents are back there, they're hollering. I've heard coaches, tell the kid, come on now, come on, let's go. Get a good pitch to hit. Next thing you know, that pitch is outside. Maybe umpire called it a strike. Then the parents going, why didn't you swing at that pitch? If you can't hit that pitch, you shouldn't be out there. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but it's not too far of an exaggeration. So I think what we're doing tonight needs to continue. I think at some point, I would love to do a coach's clinic, but more importantly, I'd love to do a parents clinic.
Yeah, we have another great question coming from a parent who's basically saying, I feel like the only way to play multiple sports for my son who's 13 is to play two sports at the same time, as his soccer team plays 9 to 10 months a year. So he has played basketball or ran track in the winter or spring, but still while playing soccer. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I just feel like that's a club that is really pushing your 13-year-old to play, 9, 10 months a year. And that's probably the wrong club to be with. And I've seen multiple clubs that consider themselves as elite. I know many D1 coaches in multiple sports. I will tell you this, they are not looking at clubs. They're looking at the full youth, the athlete. The rec side is just as good as the club, and I will challenge any rec, any club uh, director or owner on that, because it's just a marketing piece. Doctor or Danielle or Dickie, what do you think of this great question from this parent?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to add, that whole thing, how did they keep up in not playing multiple sports because one of them dominates? My initial thing was saying more than one team at a time was kind of more geared to more intense sports. To Dickie, just to kind of add on what you said, baseball is probably not as detrimental just because of the nature of it. But playing on more than one team can be tough, obviously. But I think it's got to be what you as your family unit think is what's best for your child. And you have to have a strategy of how much you want to play or what level you want to attain and how you want to interweave it in your life. And you may have to say, okay, well, club soccer team, I'm only giving you 6 months. You know what I mean? That's what you're getting. I'll pay you the full price, whatever. But this is how your team and your club fits into my vision of my life. And I need 3, 4 of those months for basketball or what have you. And that's obviously a lot easier said than done. It's hard. People feel pressure. But ultimately, this is your child and it's your investment and it's your family journey. So you got to do everything in your power, whether it may be uncomfortable or hard to do. You still need to do it for the betterment and best interest of your child.
Yeah, and if I could just touch on that, I think there's not a black and white answer. I think it's specific to each child, each athlete. And this is where, like Mr. Knowles was saying, you got to talk to your kid. You have to keep an open dialogue because some kids can sustain that, and that's okay. You have to base it on how your child is feeling. And if they're having fun and able to do the multiple sports, then let it be. But if you're seeing a change in them and a decline, then that's when you need to kind of self-reflect and say, what are we doing here? If this is running your kid into the ground, it's not working for your family or your child. And also I'll give you an example, like you were just saying, Dr. Atanda, I just did this last week with my own daughter, and I committed her to soccer for next year only for the fall season. I said no to the spring season because I already know that she has a pretty intense league that she's on, and I'm not draining her out. So I already said, hello, yes, here is my fee. She will play in the fall season for you, but she will not be participating in the spring season. And that's okay to do. You have to know your kids' limits. Again, keeping an open dialogue is super important.
This parent also just followed up by saying that they are with soccer, their child is pretty much the only athlete that is doing multiple sports right now. And I think that's really a test of really where we are today as a society. And I think, your child will excel so much more just from what we've spoken about tonight, going that multi-sport route. And I love, Dr. Tana, your comment about negotiate with that club. Just, that my child will only be playing a certain amount of time, and then they're off to the next sport. I got to tell you, the D1 coaches, when they hear about a multi-sport athlete, they will be alert to that. With whatever sport, you will be exceeding or and really allowing your child to excel as they grow through their years if that multi-sport approach is taken. Dickie, don't you agree?
Yes, I do agree. And the awareness that I've gained tonight just from listening to all you wonderful people. I hope you continue this. Sports teaches us a whole lot about life and vice versa, but we can learn a lot in sports. Sports is an absolute great tool to teach our kids. You learn teamwork. You learn to be a person that has accountability. So the sports has a lot of things. Perseverance. You learn that failure is going to happen. It's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you pick yourself up. There's a lot of great things in sports. We could talk about them over and over. And I think this discussion, adding in the topics that we've had here tonight, I encourage you to keep this going, because these are things that need to be talked about. I know there's a lot of parents out there that probably are looking at themselves tonight going, do I do that? Do I not do that? Because sometimes parents are doing it without even thinking about it. And you asked me a question earlier about coaches. I think we need to make coaches more accountable with our young people. The greatest lesson I ever got from that individual that taught me to coach was your parents, the parents of the child that you're teaching, they drop those kids off for you, not to teach them morals and values, to teach them about the game that they're playing, and also to teach them to be respectful, to respect the game, and also teach them to respect you. But also, most importantly, they are trusting you to teach their kids the right way.
Yeah, so true. Well, one thing I can say to everyone, I've known Dickie Noles for over 30 years, and getting to know him and some of his colleagues that he grew up playing with professionally, like Mike Schmidt and Larry Boa and Greg Luzinski, each one of them have what I call max joy. They're happy, joyful people because of how they grew up, how they experienced sport to them, and they are kids again when they are together. And it's because they absolutely loved their sport, but they played multiple sports. Every one of those people I just mentioned played multiple sports. So I just want to thank you, Dickie, and you, Danielle, and you, Dr. Atanda, for this wonderful discussion. This discussion will certainly continue on our next webinar with Dr. Jim Lair, who's coached 17 number one athletes in the world, considered one of the finest human performance coaches in the world. We will be sending that information out to everyone. For more information, Nemours has an incredible uh, trove of information that's available at nemours.org. And also they have an incredible website with all great tips, which is actually at kidshealth.org. We highly recommend you to use the Nemours site as an incredible opportunity just to get the latest and greatest of the research that Nemours has provided us. I want to thank you, Danielle, and you, Dr. Tana, and you, Dickie, for an incredible discussion on this very, very important topic. And we thank you for joining us tonight, and we wish you a wonderful evening, and we hope that you'll stay in touch with us for more webinars to come down the pike. Thanks again, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care, guys.